In a high-end restaurant, a black male server found a white female billionaire, utterly intoxicated, collapsed at the bar. He quietly helped her, ensuring she got home safely. Yet the very next morning he was shockingly fired. The accusation? Violating her privacy through an email supposedly sent under her name. He bore the injustice in painful silence, accepting his sudden loss. But then she awoke, watched the surveillance footage, and after a day of intense reflection, sought him out at his humble apartment. His simple act of compassion was repaid in a way no one could have predicted. Before we dive into this remarkable story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. We love hearing your thoughts. Soft rain painted fleeting lines across the tall glass windows of the exclusive Japanese restaurant, casting a hazy veil over the city's slumbering central street. Inside, a warm golden glow seeped out, streaking delicate paths across the damp sidewalk. The air was hushed, serene. Only the gentle hum of jazz drifted through the space, punctuated by the faint clinking of glassware as Derek, with quiet dignity, meticulously wiped down the bar. Though young, his dark eyes held the depth of someone who had learned to observe deeply, focused and silent. His charcoal gray Barback uniform, worn at the seams and faded at the shoulders, moved with precise, practiced grace, as if he were an extension of the space itself. From shelf to polished counter, his hands moved with seamless efficiency. Even on a slow night, his gaze never stopped, noticing every tiny smudge, every crooked stool, addressing each small flaw with second-nature diligence. Derek believed kindness began with these smallest acts, keeping a space orderly and calm, even when no one was watching. Then the glass door hissed open, unleashing a cold gust that shattered the tranquility. Charlotte Whitman, a woman in her early 30s, stumbled in. Her ivory Italian designer dress clung to her, soaked from the rain, her perfectly styled brown hair now a cascade of wet strands across her face. A sleek black leather purse slipped from her shoulder, hitting the marble floor with a dull thud. Her balance was pitiful. The heavy scent of sake, thick as fog, clung to her, barely masked by expensive perfume. She was clearly far too drunk. Her eyes, unfocused and lost, drifted through the upscale dining room, a place she should have commanded, yet now looked utterly alien. Each step seemed to demand immense effort. When she finally reached the bar, her knees buckled and she collapsed onto a stool with a heavy slump, the chair groaning and letting out a sharp squeal of protest into the silence. Charlotte tried to steady herself, trembling fingers reaching for a water bottle on the counter. Her fingertips brushed the cold glass, but her intoxicated senses betrayed her. Suddenly, her black high heel caught on the chair leg, a dry snap echoing in the quiet room. She lost balance entirely, her body hitting the marble floor hard, sliding briefly. The ivory designer dress, now blotched with sake, spread across the white stone like a spreading wound. A nearby glass tipped over, water pooling beneath the bar, catching the overhead light with a sterile gleam. Charlotte lay there, breath heavy, eyes shut tight as if trying to block out the unraveling reality. Derek had witnessed it all. He stood frozen, a glass in one hand, cloth in the other, unmoving as a statue. His muscles tensed, his throat tightened. Outside, the rain whispered against the windows. Inside, only Charlotte's labored breathing broke the silence. Derek swallowed hard, looking at her, then at the empty bar. No one else was around. He could ignore it, pretend nothing happened, go back to polishing. That would be safer. A black man working the night shift in a place like this was expected to remain unseen, to keep to his lane. How many times had he been told to know his place, to avoid interfering, especially with someone like Charlotte, a powerful white woman who even in this vulnerable state, still radiated an aura of privilege. Fear clawed at him. If he made the wrong move, if someone misread the moment, he could lose this job, a job he desperately valued. Opportunities didn't come easily for people like him. People often doubted, questioned, watched. His breath grew heavy, his heart pounding, threatening to split his chest open. But then he looked at her face again, pale, motionless, fragile. And what he saw wasn't a VIP guest or a symbol of a different world. He saw someone human, someone in need. That instinct to help, to do what's right, had always been the strongest force inside Derek. Stronger than fear, stronger than any rule he'd been taught to obey, stronger even than the injustice he'd carried in his bones. He took a quiet step forward. Carefully, respectfully, he didn't touch her. He just crouched at a safe distance and asked gently, "Ma'am, are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help?" Charlotte gave a faint nod, her eyes still closed. Derek rose and fetched a warm glass of water, placing it beside her with a stillness that felt reverent. He asked for her address, but she could barely form words. Her phone had fallen near her, still unlocked, screen glowing faintly. Perhaps she'd been trying to call for help. He tapped the Uber app. Her home address was pre-saved. Outside the restaurant, beneath the dim awning light, rain whispered against the sidewalk. Derek held the umbrella steady, his other hand gently hovering near Charlotte's back without touching her. She leaned slightly forward, one arm hugging her purse against her chest. Her steps were slow, uncertain, but steadier than before. The cold air had begun to cut through the fog of alcohol, and the silence gave her space to breathe again. Just as they reached the car door, Charlotte paused. Her eyes, still blurry, blinked a few times as if trying to bring the world into focus. Rain clung to her lashes. Then, barely turning her head, she murmured hoarsely, "Do you know who I am?" Her voice was cracked, more breath than sound, but it carried the weight of a question she hadn't meant to ask. Derek didn't hesitate. His gaze stayed calm, grounded. "It doesn't matter," he said quietly. "You needed help. That was it. No judgment, no questions, just steady hands and a borrowed umbrella." He waited as she eased into the back seat of the Uber, pulling the door gently behind her. The car rolled off into the night, taillights glowing like fading embers in the rain. Above them, tucked behind the sway of a potted plant, the restaurant's security camera blinked silently, recording everything: the fall, the kindness, the goodbye. Derek never looked up. He didn't know the lens had seen it all. He didn't know that in a world where silence could be misread, his quiet act of decency might soon become something else entirely. The morning after felt heavier than usual. Derek moved quietly through the back of the restaurant, stocking bottles and wiping down counters. His eyes were sharp, but the weight behind them had changed. Something hung in the air, tighter, colder. The call came just after 10 o'clock. The manager's voice was tight-jawed, hesitant. "Derek, they want to see you. Headquarters. 11 o'clock today." He handed Derek a small, folded piece of paper. The weight of it felt like a summons. A creeping unease settled in Derek's gut. The manager didn't meet his eyes, just turned and walked away. An hour later, Derek stood in the marble-floored lobby of a corporate tower he'd never been inside before. He felt out of place, a small, dark shadow against the vast, pale grandeur. A receptionist escorted him without a word. Then the door opened and he stepped into a room that seemed colder than the building itself. Morrison sat behind a monolithic desk of black glass, arms folded, eyes unreadable. He didn't offer a seat, just gestured with a curt flick of his wrist. Derek sat quietly, his hands still in his lap. Without a greeting, Morrison placed a sleek tablet on the desk. A video began to play. No sound, just grainy black and white footage. Charlotte stumbling, Derek stepping forward with the water, then his hand reaching for her phone, tapping the screen, navigating to the Uber app, confirming the destination. It was all so quick, so necessary at the time, but now, on this sterile screen, it looked invasive, exploitative even. Morrison's eyes, fixed on him, seemed to pierce right through, accusing. The moment that had felt private, quiet, and he thought good now looked like something else entirely. A clandestine act, a breach. Next to the tablet, Morrison placed a sheet of paper. A printed email. The subject line read, "Unsafe Employee Conduct Incident Report." The sender, Charlotte Whitman. Derek stared at it, his throat tightening. The room seemed to shrink. "You see the issue here, Derek?" Morrison finally spoke, his voice low, even, soaked in condescension. "You approached a high-level guest, Ms. Whitman. You then proceeded to access her personal device without explicit consent and arranged transportation. These are severe breaches of protocol, especially concerning a shareholder of her standing. We cannot have employees, especially those in your position, taking such liberties with guest privacy and security." Morrison's gaze hardened. He tapped the tablet like he was stamping a verdict. "Your role is to clean, Derek. A barback doesn't decide what constitutes appropriate personal interaction or digital access for our clientele, especially not when it involves someone of her standing." Derek's mind raced, a desperate, silent protest building within him. Charlotte, the very person he'd helped, had betrayed him. The warmth he'd felt for her vulnerability twisted into a cold, heavy sadness. He had extended kindness and she had responded with a weapon. The words died in his throat. He felt the flush creeping up his neck, not from guilt, but from the sickening realization that this wasn't about truth. It was about power, perception, and a convenient scapegoat. Morrison leaned back in his chair. "You're not being charged, but this company values discretion, reputation, and she," he nodded toward the email, "felt unsafe. She explicitly stated that the unauthorized handling of her personal property, specifically her phone, left her feeling vulnerable and compromised. You made her feel unsafe." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside, termination documents all printed already. "We can't employ someone who doesn't know their place." Derek looked at the papers. The words settled into a sharp clarity that hurt more than anything Morrison had said aloud. He stood, offered no defense, created no scene. He just left with the folder in hand and something heavier buried deep in his chest. At home in his narrow room with peeling paint, Derek opened his closet. His uniform, white shirt, black vest, still hung neatly from the hook, a symbol of the stability he'd fought so hard to build. He reached up and took it down, a tremor running through his fingers. He folded each piece slowly, carefully, with dignity. He slid the stack into the bottom drawer of the dresser and closed it with a soft push. Each fold, each movement felt like an admission of defeat. Now that fragile security was gone. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, head bowed. The quiet was hollow. The phone sat face down on the nightstand, screen dark. He picked it up and dialed. His mother answered on the second ring. "Baby, I lost the job," he said, the words a raw, bitter lump in his throat. "This morning." Pause. A silence that stretched heavier than any silence he'd felt in Morrison's office. "What happened?" His mother's voice, laced with a sudden, sharp fear, cut through the quiet. "I helped someone and that was the problem." He didn't say more. Couldn't. "My son," his mother's voice, though still tinged with worry, softened, then transformed into a familiar strength. "Kindness is never wrong, my dear. Don't let this harden you. Your mother and the whole family will always be here to bear everything with you." He ended the call gently, let the phone fall to the mattress and sat back in silence, feeling the kind of ache that didn't swell or sting, just stayed. It was the ache of a heavy burden newly added, pressing down on his already weary shoulders. Sunlight crept across the marble floor in Charlotte's apartment. The city beyond buzzed faintly. Charlotte stirred beneath the silk throw blanket tossed carelessly over her couch, her head throbbing with a dull pressure. She sat up slowly, hand pressing to her forehead. Everything from the night before came back in vague outlines. Flashes of laughter, blurred faces, and a strange, warm voice. Someone helping her into a car. The memory was fogged. She reached for her phone on the kitchen counter. Notifications lit the screen. One caught her eye, an email sent just after midnight from herself. Her finger hovered for a second, then tapped. Subject: Unsafe Employee Conduct Incident Report. She blinked, read it again. The words sat there, sterile and damning, alleging an employee accessed her phone, violated boundaries, made her feel unsafe. Attached: surveillance footage from outside the restaurant. Her lips parted. She didn't remember writing any of this. She opened the video. There was grainy footage in black and white. Her body stumbling, collapsing near the curb. A man, him, stepping forward, holding out an umbrella, then kneeling, pulling out her phone. Her breath caught. She leaned closer. The screen showed him opening the ride app, entering her address, carefully placing the phone back. His hands never lingered, his eyes never wandered. Only clarity, urgency, and caution. He watched the clip again and then again. Each time something tightened in her chest. That wasn't misconduct. That was protection. Charlotte knew she hadn't written that email. But someone wanted it to look like she had. Her pulse rose as she sat back, staring at the screen. Someone had accessed her account, someone who needed that narrative, needed him gone. And she knew exactly who had both motive and means. Morrison. The boardroom. She had been cornered after a failed acquisition, a deal Morrison himself had championed. She was blamed for the fallout, forced to sign over controlling shares. The contract had been printed ahead of time. That part haunted her. That night she signed her name under pressure was the same night she drank too much, the same night she ended up at the bar, and the same night someone took advantage of her vulnerability again to silence a witness. The man in the video who had simply tried to help was now branded unsafe because of a lie linked to her. He had shown her a rare kindness, and in return he had lost everything. The injustice burned. She owed him. She had to make this right, not just for herself but for him. The following morning, with a clear mind and unwavering resolve, she pulled on a coat, slipped into flats and grabbed sunglasses. She had an address from the employee file. Just a neighborhood, a building across from a coffee shop on 90th. A short drive later, Charlotte stood outside a worn-down apartment building. She found his unit number and knocked. The door, slightly ajar, revealed Derek inside. He was meticulously sweeping the small living room. The air in the cramped space hung heavy with the scent of old dust and resignation. He looked up, broom still in hand, his face etched with fatigue, tightened with instant recognition and a fresh wave of guardedness. He stayed still, broom in hand, waiting. Charlotte's voice was soft, hesitant. "Derek, I need to talk to you. Would you mind coming to the coffee shop across the street? It's quieter there." He paused. After a beat, he gave a curt nod. "Fine." He put the broom aside, grabbed a worn jacket from a hook by the door and followed her out. They sat across from each other in the small cafe that smelled of cinnamon and something burnt. Charlotte didn't touch her coffee, her eyes behind the dark glasses locked on his. "I know who you are," he said flatly, his voice drained of warmth, a shield. "You're here about the job, I suppose. It's done. I lost it." The weight of his defeat hung heavy. "Seems like kindness has a high price these days," he added, a weary truth. "I saw the video," she said, her voice soft but firm, laced with urgency. "I didn't send that email. Someone accessed my account and did this. It was Morrison. I'm sure of it. I am truly sorry this happened to you." A flicker of genuine regret crossed her face. Derek's fingers froze on the paper cup. His gaze sharpened, a flicker of bewildered surprise battling with the deep hurt still felt. He didn't speak, but the subtle shift in his stillness was palpable. She wasn't just denying it, she was admitting complicity. He watched her, trying to decipher the truth. She leaned forward slightly, her voice a quiet confession. "I've lost something too. They took my shares, pushed me out of my own company. I was drunk the night you helped me because it was the night they made me sign everything away. And now you're the fallout, an innocent person caught in my disaster." His eyes finally met hers. "I know what it feels like," she said, her gaze holding his, no hint of pretense, "to be erased quietly, efficiently, and made to look like you're the problem. I thought maybe I was the only one." A long silence followed. He didn't blink, but something behind his eyes shifted, less suspicion, more recognition. He leaned back. "You're not." As Charlotte gathered her things, a crucial thought struck her. She couldn't leave it at this, she had caused this. "Derek," she began, her voice a little softer, her resolve clear. I'm going to look into this. Everything. I need to understand exactly what happened, not just for me but for you. And I know you lost your job because of this. I want to help financially until you get back on your feet or we figure this out." She pulled out her phone. "Would you mind giving me your number, just so I can keep you updated and arrange that?" He looked at her, the offer unexpected. A flash of pride, sharp and bitter, warred with the stark reality of his empty pockets, his lost job, and the shadow of his sister's college dreams. He took a slow breath, then with a barely perceptible nod, he gave in to the crushing necessity. He recited his number, his voice low, tinged with reluctant resignation. "Thank you," she said, her voice genuine, sensing his struggle. "I'll be in touch." Derek merely gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement that left room for both possibility and lingering doubt, but mostly a quiet acceptance of a compromise he didn't want to make. Charlotte left the coffee shop as the sun set. Her relief from being understood quickly turned into steely resolve. She had seen the truth in Derek's tired eyes. They both had lost everything. Now only the truth could bring justice for them and the silent victims like them. She wasn't a passive bystander anymore. The contact info in her phone felt like a fragile key to answers they needed. In the following days, Charlotte threw herself into the investigation, digging through old records for irregularities. She uncovered a network of shell companies linked to Morrison, masking his control. Night after night, her study stayed lit, Documents and spreadsheets spread before her, exhaustion weighing on her, but determination keeping her going. One night in the nearly empty park, Charlotte waited, tablet in hand, visibly tired but urgent. Derek appeared quietly, scanning the area before standing a few feet away. Without greeting, Charlotte showed him the damning evidence on her tablet. Log files, emails, a strategy to replace people like him, not for merit but to silence questions. Derek's silence was heavy, tired but not cold. He finally spoke, revealing his sister had just earned a full college scholarship, a first for their family. He had worked tirelessly to keep her dreams alive. "I can't lose her future over this," he said quietly, his voice carrying a simmering rage born of fear and hope. He asked if they were tracking him. Charlotte didn't answer, but Derek's jaw clenched as he realized the scope of Morrison's reach. "They're not just trying to ruin me, they're threatening her." His silence no longer an option. He looked back at Charlotte. "You can't fight this alone." Charlotte stepped closer, her voice firm but calm. "Silence helps them win. How many more have to suffer before change happens?" A long pause. Then Derek nodded. "I'm in." This wasn't just a promise. It was a choice forged by necessity. Their alliance was quickly tested. Charlotte reached out to former employees on Morrison's purge list. Doors slammed, calls unanswered, people vanished. Morrison had severed ties to ensure silence. Derek faced brutal pressure too. Job offers vanished, recruiters disappeared. He knew Morrison was watching, scheming. Despite the mounting pressure, Derek kept his sister's future in mind, masking his struggles. Late one night he texted Charlotte, "Something's happened. The scholarship is under review." Charlotte called immediately. Derek's voice was heavy with dread. The school's secondary review was no accident. Morrison knew, had retaliated. Charlotte promised to fight harder. Derek sighed but remained firm. "I made my choice. We can't let him win." They were no longer just fighting for themselves. It was a battle to protect the unseen, to expose the powerful and prove resilience could overcome. The threat to Derek's sister's scholarship didn't deter them. Instead, it ignited a fierce anger and an unyielding determination within both Charlotte and Derek. It was the clearest proof of Morrison's ruthlessness and also the strongest motivation for them to act. They understood that continuing to remain silent or operating in the shadows would never be enough to truly change things and protect innocent people. They needed a bolder plan, a direct confrontation. Charlotte, with her experience in boardroom dynamics and data analysis, began building an ironclad case against Morrison's transgressions. She worked tirelessly, transforming fear into fuel, piecing together every fragment of truth. Derek, no longer merely a victim, became a living witness. He not only helped Charlotte strengthen the case with stories of discrimination and internal pressure but also served as a constant source of moral support. He reminded her why they were fighting, not for revenge but to protect the vulnerable. They meticulously planned for the most critical moment, a special board meeting. It would be their only chance to expose everything, to confront Morrison and his accomplices. The tension mounted, but they knew they had no other choice. The safety of Derek's sister and of countless others who had suffered in silence depended on this confrontation. The momentous day finally arrived. With each step into the familiar skyscraper, the tension mounted, accompanied by an unshakable resolve. Charlotte and Derek spoke little. Everything had been said, all evidence meticulously arranged. As the large boardroom doors swung open, revealing the silent and cold space within, they knew there was no turning back. The boardroom had never felt colder. Charlotte stood at the head of the long table, the city skyline sprawling behind her, but all eyes were fixed on the large screen. No one looked at Morrison. She clicked the remote once. The first video played. Security footage, Charlotte stumbling, Derek stepping in, the umbrella, the car door held open. No sound, but the truth needed none. The second click revealed the forged email, the incident report bearing her name, time-stamped while she'd been unconscious. Then came the charts, 18 months of hiring patterns across the flagship location. Nearly every frontline Black employee systematically replaced, not for better performance but for silence, for the kind of unquestioning loyalty Morrison demanded. Charlotte didn't raise her voice. Each slide was a scalpel, precise and cutting. At the far end of the table, Morrison sat with his arms folded, but the confidence had drained from his face. His jaw tightened with each frame. By the end his knuckles were white. "I didn't authorize that message," Charlotte said calmly, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces. "Nor did I consent to the erasure of the people who built this place's culture. But I know who did." The room didn't erupt, it cracked. A fissure of whispers exchanged glances. One of the board members, a stern-faced woman, motioned toward the door, a silent command for him to leave. Then Derek stepped forward. He didn't wear a suit, just a clean shirt, sleeves rolled, dignity held like armor. He didn't touch the podium. He spoke from where he stood, his voice steady and clear, reaching every corner of the room. "I'm not here to get my job back," he said. "I'm here so no one else loses theirs for doing the right thing." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I helped someone who needed help. I used her phone to call a ride when she couldn't walk. I didn't know kindness could look like a threat until someone decided it was." He looked straight at Morrison, his gaze unwavering. "I didn't make her unsafe. But you made this place unsafe for anyone who didn't fit your version of loyalty." Morrison didn't answer. His silence was deafening, filling the room with the weight of his guilt. Hours later, Morrison walked down the long hallway alone. The board had voted unanimously. His removal was swift and absolute. No send-off, no handshakes, just the cold, echoing sound of his own footsteps fading into the silence of his ignominious departure. The once untouchable empire he had built crumbled. The news spread like wildfire through the company and the media. Morrison's fall sent shockwaves through the corporate world. A cautionary tale of unchecked power and hidden injustices finally brought to light. For Charlotte it was a profound vindication. Her name was cleared, her reputation restored, but more importantly the truth had prevailed. She publicly detailed the systemic racism and manipulation, vowing to advocate for the displaced employees. Derek too found his name cleared. The incident report was formally retracted and his records were expunged. The school swiftly reinstated his sister's scholarship, offering a formal apology. But for both Derek and Charlotte, the victory was bittersweet. They had seen the insidious reach of corruption, the fear it instilled and the damage it wrought. Their fight was over, but the scars remained, reminding them of the fragility of justice. Months passed. The old storefront in Harlem had once been a dusty shadow, its windows boarded up. Now sunlight poured over scaffolding, brushes moved across vibrant new walls, and a new sign gleamed above the entrance in bold, simple letters. Aura Collective. Charlotte stood beside Derek on the sidewalk, both wearing paint-splattered clothes, a testament to their shared labor of love. She handed him a cup of coffee, and together they watched workers hammer the last plank into place. The air buzzed with energy, not the frantic pace of corporate ambition, but the steady rhythm of creation. Inside there were no gold plaques, no velvet ropes, just warm wood, natural light and long communal tables built for conversation, not distance. It was designed to feel like home, a gathering place for the community. Derek, now co-owner and manager, sat across from a young woman during interviews, not asking about resumes or past experience in the traditional sense, but about the last time they helped someone they didn't know, about moments of genuine human connection. One told him about carrying groceries for a blind man in the rain. Another had waited hours with a stranger at the ear. He listened intently to their stories, smiled warmly, and seeing the spark of innate kindness in their eyes, he hired them on the spot. Opening day came like sunrise after a long, dark night. Music drifted through the open windows, a blend of jazz and soul. Children laughed near the sidewalk chalkboard, drawing colorful masterpieces. Derek's mother walked in slowly, unsure, dressed in a soft blue dress she hadn't worn in years. No gloves on her hands, but boundless pride shining in her eyes. Charlotte met her halfway, reaching out with both hands, a silent embrace of shared joy and overcoming. "Welcome," Charlotte said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. There were no uniforms, no whispered judgments, just people sharing food, sharing space, connecting. Near closing, Derek leaned against the reclaimed wood bar, watching it all unfold. His voice was soft, laced with a quiet satisfaction when he finally spoke. "We're not running a restaurant," he said, looking out at the last lingering guests. Charlotte looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the dimming lights. "No," she agreed, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "We're building a place where no one has to prove they deserve to be here." The lights dimmed slightly more, casting golden shadows across the room. And in that warm, inviting light, for the first time in a long time, something felt truly whole. The space wasn't just a business. It was a testament to their shared journey, a haven where kindness flourished, born from the ashes of injustice. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.